Hi, I'm Bob Rankin. I hope you enjoy the following free art lesson. One of the questions I'm most often asked is how do you get those colors that you use in your abstracts? How do you get those incredible colors that you use in some of your seascapes or landscapes or any of the paintings that I use? And a lot of it's just simply experience and just working over the past 35 years in producing art. But there is a certain rule that you should be able to follow. I'm a firm believer that you need to know how to break the rules. You have to know the rules first. So how do you go ahead and set up a palette? When you're first starting to paint and you're going into the art store and you have this huge selection of paints to choose from, what's necessary for you? Well, theoretically, you should only need to get 5 different colors. That would be primary red, primary blue, primary yellow, and black and white. Now, when I was teaching high school, I had an experiment with the students, especially in Art 1, is that they needed to know how to make up any color that they saw in any painting, any landscape, anywhere. And it was a great discipline for them. In order for them to find the color, they needed to know how to use the color wheel. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. For example, one of the experiments I had them to work with is that they had to choose a famous master's painting. And then they would take a 2 by 3 inch square of that painting and they had to duplicate it perfectly using the 3 primaries plus black and white. And it was a great experiment for them. It's tedious at times, but when you finish being able to do that, you really know how to use that color wheel. So if you take a look at the palette over here, I've set it up in somewhat of a triangle, plus the black and white off to the side. Primary blue, which is essentially cyan, or turquoise blue. We have yellow, which is cadmium yellow light, and we have this primary red, which can be cadmium red medium or cadmium red light. So by mixing these together, these are all primary colors, let's look at what happens when we start to combine the primary colors together. Well, of course, they will form secondary colors. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue, and of course, you're going to end up with the secondary color of green. Over here, I'm going to be taking a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and of course you're going to end up with the secondary color of orange. And then over here, I'm going to be mixing the blue plus the red, and you'll end up with a really interesting violet or purple. So those are your secondary colors. Now the colors in between that you'll end up with, for example, if I mix yellow and orange together, you're going to end up with yellow-orange. When I mix yellow and green together, you're going to end up with yellow-green. If I mix blue and green together, blue-green. And of course, blue and purple together, I'm running out of fingers here, you're going to end up with blue-purple. And then over here, you're going to end up with red-violet. So that forms the tertiary axis, and that's where it really starts to become magic. So, and you can see I'm painting with my hands here, so that in its own right can be kind of interesting because you're forming your own color wheel just by making little prints right there. So now how do we go ahead and use that and put it to an application? I'm going to show you the color wheel here, and I want you to really study it for a second. The color wheel, like we just mentioned, the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And secondary colors, of course, are orange, green, and violet. And then you have your tertiary colors, which you get by mixing a primary and a secondary color together. So we've already done that. I've shown you how to arrive at that. And then you need to know how to use it. So over here on this demonstration board, and I have all my students do this, it's a great way of starting and to understand color. Value is the difference between light and dark. So within that, I have them start off with tints. Tints meaning the addition of white to a color. Then it fades into shades. Shade, the addition of black to a color. And down at the bottom, we have tones. Tones are the addition of gray to a color. And it's the tones that really make a painting work. It's what brings it together. It's the glue. It's the neutral zone within a painting. When you have really active abstract paintings going on and you have a brilliant red and a brilliant orange and a brilliant yellow, if you put all those together, they might very easily clash. But if you come back in with a tone of one of those colors, it acts as a neutral and it lets them all breathe within the same space. It's the most important part of this whole exercise. In addition to that, once you've done the color chart and the tints, tones, and shades, then that you put them to use where you start off with very light and do a nice, smooth, gradual blend in to dark. If you can master this, then you're really ready to start painting. So, how do we get tones? Well, I'll go ahead and show a little example of that. I'm going to go ahead and mix up a white and a black to create gray. And of course, there are millions of different values of gray. This is just one that I'm using for demonstration purposes. And to that, let's go ahead and add some of this red violet over here. Or blue violet, excuse me. And I'm really putting a lot of pressure in this brush, so it gives a great tonal effect. And then when we start to apply that, here you can see that you have a really rich gray. And because I'm using a combination of blue, which is a cool color, and red, which is a warm color, it's going to be a very neutral gray. Now I'm going to show you how to warm up a gray. I'm starting off again with black and white. And in this case, let's go over here to this part of the palette. Bring in a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red. It already has a lot of gray mixed in with it. Going back here, picking up some more of that gray. And let's look at that gray in relationship to that cooler gray. Look what happens there. So that's a really warm grayed tone. Now, let's try for a really, really cool gray. Again, going back to the gray that we mix by adding black and white together. Bring in some green, bring in some blue, a little bit more gray. Maybe want this one a little bit darker, a little bit cooler. Bring in even more blue into it. And look at the coolness of that gray. So you have three great variations of tones there. And the inclusion of that into any painting will really enhance it tremendously. Now, there's another very important clue that we need to always respond to. We know that we can change the value of a color by adding black, white, or gray. But most importantly, the way that you should change the value of a color is by adding part of its complementary color. For example, I have a little chart here where I have shown you the difference with what happens when you add black to a color. Now, if you add black to yellow, you end up with what I call baby doo-doo grunt green. It's rather bizarre. Now, in some cases, this might work beautifully for you, but rarely does it. It really kills the color. And the reason being, the property of black has a lot of blue already mixed in with it. So if you're adding this black to the yellow, the blue properties within the black mix in with the yellow and turn it into this baby doo-doo grunt green. Now, if you really want to tone that down and keep the richness of the yellow, then you mix in part of its complementary color. For example, I'll come back in and mix in the complementary color of yellow, and the complementary color of yellow, complementary color, so those colors directly across from each other on the color wheel. So that's violet. The complementary color of blue, of course, is orange. Complementary color of green is red. Another way of remembering that, and also remembering the color wheel, is to think Christmas, red and green, and Easter, yellow and violet at the Howard Johnsons of the old age or the Miami Dolphins, orange and blue. If you just keep that stupid phrase in your mind, you will always be able to find that complementary color in a heartbeat. So I'm going to go ahead and take some yellow over here. I'm going to go ahead and mix in part of its complementary color, and we know that the complementary color of that is purple. So we can go ahead, I'm just going to actually use a palette knife here. There's a really nice purple right there. And to this yellow, to tone it down just a little bit, I'm going to add just a small amount of this purple. And here you can see when I'm applying that, this is a toned down yellow. If I want to tone it down more, of course, just add a little bit more of that purple. To blend it in together, I'm going to do a figure 8 here. Just do a really nice smooth transition. Just lightening up and feathering that color into the previous color. And here you can see you retain the richness of that yellow, toning it down with part of its complement, and it really works beautifully in the end. So that's a very basic beginning start on learning how to mix and blend colors. I hope you've enjoyed it. Go ahead and get out there and start painting. We'll see you in the near future.